Hi, I'm Jacques Lebec, and in this video I am going to show how I made my worm tea brewer. It's fairly simple. You only need a few things, and most of them you probably have around the house. I purchased a new bucket. I have plenty of buckets around, but for this I just purchased a new one. We were down at Lowe's, and so I picked one up with the new lid. I use a lid because I don't like the formula to go bouncing all over the place and come out the top and bubbling over and foaming. There's quite a bit of activity in there when you get the air flowing. So this is just a typical plastic 5-gallon bucket. I drilled 2 holes in it, and you'll see what those are for. With a lid, I made a cutout for the hose on one end and a hole in the center for my string, which holds the bag of castings up off the bottom of the bucket. This is my diffuser. I made this out of 1/2-inch drip line irrigation stuff that I had left over. And the way I did it was I took a piece of tubing and I cut it to match the inside. This is not it. To match the inside diameter of the bucket. I took a tee, a drip irrigation tee, and remember this is way too big, and I put it at a 90-degree angle to the hose. And in the feeder end, I took another piece which is long enough to go out of the bucket and put it in this end. In the disperser hose, I drilled 150 1/16 inch holes all the way around. I drilled them all the way through. Some I went up and down vertical, and some I went horizontal, just to get the air to disperse correctly. The disperser hose sits down inside the bucket, fits almost perfectly, and I rotate it to make sure the holes are lined up. I tuck it down into the bottom of the bucket. I take my tie wrap on my hole and I put one end through here, tuck it back in there, and the other end through the other side. Then I tighten it up. What this does is it helps to hold the disperser tube into the bottom of the bucket. And there you have it. Pretty simple. Once you have the disperser tube set on the bottom of the bucket, we can then rig up the lid, the castings, and the bag. Now I use paint strainer bags. I've used this one several times. It's dirty. I can run it through the clothes washer. And this is what they look like. It's a 1-gallon paint strainer. You can use cheesecloth. You could use an old sock. You can use a nylon stocking. I guess they're out of style, but you can use them. Or you can just take the castings and dump it right into the bucket with no straining at all. I prefer to use the straining, the net, because I distribute the worm tea out of a watering can, and once you have the diffuser on the end of the watering can, it has a tendency to clog up with all the casting organic material that's left in the bucket. I just use a strainer bag. So the first thing I do is I get my castings. I have a big bin of them back there, and my worms are constantly making more. I have 4 worm farms in the garage and 9 garden boxes out here that I have there's probably 3,000 to 4,000 worms in each worm. This container is just over a pint. It's about a pint and an eighth. I don't go by wet weight. With wet weight, in order to be consistent from batch to batch, you'd have to know the moisture level. And I don't care to go through all that. I found that just over a pint works great with 5 gallons. I don't put 5 gallons in there. I put about 4, and I leave an airspace between the water and the lid to allow for foaming and overflowing. So I take the worm castings and I put them in the paint strainer bag, just like that. Set that aside. And what you want to do is make sure that the bag hangs just a little bit off the bottom. It doesn't matter, an inch, 3 inches, whatever. It really doesn't matter. And that's what the string is for. I tie a half hitch, for all you Boy Scouts out there, a half hitch around the neck of this thing, and that secures it really well. And that will suspend in the liquid just about the right level. If I need to adjust it up and down, I have a dowel that I put a hole in, and I can adjust it with this dowel. All I got to do is tie a new knot. Then this just snaps on there, but not yet. I got to put the water in. It'll just snap in there, and it'll hold everything at the right levels. Okay, now we can put the water in. So I take the water. This has been sitting out all night, and I'll pour it in there. These are 3-gallon buckets. I like them. They're easier to handle. They don't weigh as much full. And I fill this to about an inch below the holes that hold the hose in. Okay, I moved the camera to where we can see how the bubbles and the diffuser works. So I'll plug in the air compressor. I use my 20-gallon Craftsman air compressor. It puts out a whole bunch of air. I bought it back in about 1978 for $200. It's been a real workhorse. But I set the gauge down to 5 psi, and it does real well. And this is about how the diffusion and the bubbles should look. That's just about the right amount of bubbles. It's a nice circulation. And now I'll put the lid on, and we will start to brew some tea. Here's the lid. The bag will go right down in there, line up the hose, snap it in place, and there you have it. Plug in the air, and now we'll let it brew until this time tomorrow, and it'll be ready. Well, we're back. It's 24 hours later. It's been percolating well overnight. In fact, it's a little bit longer than 24 hours. I'm going to remove the lid, and this is what the worm tea brewed looks like. I'll let the bag drip off. I'm wearing vinyl gloves because after all this is manure and I gotta squeeze the bag to get the stuff out, and I really don't want this. I don't want to mess with manure, so put that in there. Alrighty, and that's about how it bubbled, and that's what it should look like when it's brewed. Disconnect it, and I'll take out my 2-gallon watering can. I'm going to put a half a gallon of worm tea in my water can, and I will fill the rest up with water. It'll be 1.5 gallons of water and a half a gallon of worm tea. We can dilute this to 10 times. It doesn't take very much worm tea to fertilize a plant. So I use a mason jar for measuring. Pour it in there, and I will fill the watering can with water, and then I will put it on the plants. And I'm going to move the camera out to one of my containers, and I will show you how much to put on a plant. So here we are out at the garden box, and I have the camera on a beefsteak tomato. I added the water to the watering can. I have a 25% solution, and well, all you got to do is just pour the worm tea at the bottom. I put about 1 quart on. I have no way of measuring it right now. I could put it at the base of the plant. You can pour it out of a watering can. You can use the disperser if you want, or without. And you can even put it in a sprayer. The advantage of putting it in a sprayer is that you can then put the worm tea, which is almost all nitrogen, on the leaves of the plant, and it helps to eradicate some of the pests, aphids and so forth. I put it on everything, and I'd like to pan over to my artichoke plants and show you the difference. I've done a controlled test with it for the past year, and it shows remarkable results. That artichoke plant is without worm tea, and it's about 3.5 feet high. It has 2 or 3 artichokes on it, and it's doing well, and I would be very happy with it under normal circumstances. And then my other artichoke plant, pan over to it, which is right there. That is a cherry tree right next to it. We counted 14 artichokes on that thing. That's with worm tea. It's a big plant. It's doing really well. I treated these, I put worm tea also on these rose bushes, and they're doing great too, all my rose bushes. So I do get good results with worm tea, and I think if you use it you will too. Now you can buy the castings. I know that they sell them at Costco, or like me, you can raise worms and take advantage of their byproducts. Pretty enjoyable hobby, actually. It may sound a little strange, but is actually very rewarding. So that's how to make a worm tea brewer and how to apply it on your plants. And actually I showed you the end result as well, which is well worth the effort, the time, and the money, the little bit of money you put into it, which, you know, the initial cost of raising the worms and things. But alrighty, this is Jacques Lebec with emergencykitsplus.com. I hope you learned something, and I really hope I didn't put you to sleep. So see you next time. Thanks for watching the video.